Think you know Edward Scissorhands? Think again. In this video, we uncover 20 surprising and emotional facts about Tim Burton's Gothic masterpiece, from Johnny Depp's haunting transformation to the heartbreaking truth behind the film's creation. Fact 1. Edward Scissorhands barely speaks. Johnny Depp's performance is hauntingly quiet, just 150 words in the entire film. But what he lacks in dialogue, he replaces with pure emotion. Depp studied silent film legends like Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, learning how to tell stories through movement and expression instead of speech. He even practiced communicating entire emotions using only his eyes. Burton loved the idea Edward wasn't meant to fit in or sound like everyone else. His silence makes the pastel suburb seem even louder and more artificial. In interviews, Depp said playing Edward felt like acting from the inside out. Every tilt of the head and shy glance was a line of dialogue that didn't need to be spoken. Fact 2. At its heart, Edward Scissorhands is Burton's modern Frankenstein story, the lonely creation who just wants love in a world that fears him. But it's also Beauty and the Beast, flipped upside down. Instead of a beautiful monster hidden away, Edward is brought into the light into Suburbia, where the real monsters are the smiling neighbors. Burton wove classic Gothic literature into pastel Americana to show how cruelty can wear a friendly face. He even designed Edward's mansion to look like an abandoned Frankenstein lab, covered in fairy tale vines. The mix of innocence and horror became Burton's trademark. Fact 3. On set, the chemistry between Johnny Depp and Winona Ryder wasn't just acting, they were genuinely falling in love. The pair began dating during filming, and Depp famously got Winona Forever tattooed on his arm. Their connection gave the film a layer of authenticity that radiates through every scene they share. When Kim whispers, "Hold me," and Edward replies, "I can't," you can feel the heartbreak of two people who understand each other completely. Unfortunately, their relationship ended a few years later, and Depp changed his tattoo to Wino Forever. But both actors have said Edward Scissorhands remains one of their most emotional experiences. Fact 4. The candy-colored neighborhood in Edward Scissorhands wasn't just a set, it was a mirror. Tim Burton grew up in Burbank, California, surrounded by rows of identical pastel houses and smiling neighbors who all seemed perfectly normal. To Burton, it was a world that looked like paradise but felt like a cage. That tension became the heart of Edward Scissorhands. Every pastel house, gossiping neighbor, and bland barbecue was pulled straight from his memories. To make it real, Burton found a real neighborhood in Lutz, Florida, and had every house repainted in bubblegum pinks and mint greens. Residents later joked it was like living inside a candy store. The set design wasn't just aesthetic, it was emotional storytelling. Edward's Gothic mansion, looming over a sea of pastel homes, symbolized Burton himself, the misunderstood artist, watching a world that never quite understood his kind of beauty. Fact 5. Believe it or not, Edward Scissorhands almost came to life as a full-blown musical. Early drafts included songs written for Edward, Kim, and the inventor, expressing their inner worlds through melody. Burton eventually dropped the idea, fearing it would distract from the film's emotional core, but traces remain. Danny Elfman's haunting score serves as the film's beating heart, filling in where lyrics would have gone. The main theme, with those angelic choirs and waltzing strings, was Elfman's musical translation of Edward's soul, lonely, beautiful, and broken. Elfman later said it was the most personal composition of his career. Ironically, Edward Scissorhands would go on to inspire several stage adaptations and ballet performances years later. Fact 6. Before Edward Scissorhands was a film, it was a feeling drawn in pencil by a lonely teenage Tim Burton. Growing up in a perfectly manicured California suburb, Burton always felt like the odd one out. One day, he sketched a pale boy with sharp blades for fingers, standing alone on a hill. To him, it symbolized isolation, the desire to touch, to connect, but being too dangerous to do so. Years later, that same sketch became the emotional core of Edward Scissorhands. Burton said, "Edward is me. He's how I felt as a kid, misunderstood, different, and trapped in a world that didn't get it." That drawing stayed pinned on his wall for decades, waiting for the day it would bleed into film. Fact 7. Here's a wild one. Top Gun's Tom Cruise nearly played the gentle, Gothic Edward Scissorhands. Early in development, studio executives pushed for a more marketable star, and Cruise was at the top of every list. He even met with Tim Burton to discuss the role. But there was one problem. Cruise wanted logic in a fairy tale. He asked Burton detailed questions. How does Edward eat, sleep, or use the bathroom? Burton reportedly grew frustrated, realizing Cruise didn't grasp the story's emotional core. The studio also suggested giving Edward normal hands at the end, which horrified Burton. He wanted heartbreak, not Hollywood endings. Eventually, Cruise passed, calling the movie too weird. Enter Johnny Depp, who saw weirdness as beauty. It's impossible now to imagine anyone else in that leather suit, though somewhere out there's a universe where Tom Cruise trimmed hedges instead of flying fighter jets. Fact 8. When Johnny Depp first read Edward Scissorhands, he reportedly locked himself in a room and cried. He said the story hit too close to home. The loneliness, the struggle to be accepted, and the quiet sadness behind Edward's eyes mirrored his own feelings as an outsider in Hollywood. Depp even wrote in his journal, "I am Edward." That emotional connection shaped everything about his performance. Burton noticed it immediately. He didn't play Edward, he was Edward. Depp's sense sensitivity turned what could have been a quirky role into a haunting portrayal of innocence and pain. In later interviews, Depp said, "Edward Scissorhands was the film that changed his career and his life forever." Fact 9. Filming Edward Scissorhands wasn't easy. The Florida neighborhood where it was shot became a surreal pastel nightmare of constant humidity, bright sun, and houses painted in candy colors that reflected blinding light. The crew jokingly called it Suburban Hell. Johnny Depp's black leather suit absorbed the heat, while extras fainted during long takes. The contrast between the idyllic visuals and the miserable filming conditions perfectly captured the movie's tone, beauty hiding discomfort. Burton thrived on that tension. He told the cast, "If it feels too perfect, it's wrong." By the end of production, many actors said they were emotionally drained, but proud. The suburban dream had become Burton's dark fairy tale. Fact 10. Edward's wild, gravity-defying hair is one of the most iconic aspects of the character, but it almost looked completely different. The original designs envisioned a much smoother, less chaotic hairstyle, something closer to a neat, goth-inspired cut. Tim Burton quickly realized this wouldn't reflect Edward's emotional turmoil or his created, unfinished nature. The final look, with jagged spikes and uneven strands, was achieved using wax, hairspray, and a surprising number of hidden wires to hold the shape. Johnny Depp reportedly had to sit through 3 hours of hair prep each day, and even then, the style required constant touch-ups between takes. Fact 11. The film's most magical scene, where Edward carves an ice sculpture and snow falls over Kim, dancing in the flakes, was inspired by Tim Burton's real-life memory. As a child, Burton imagined snow falling for the first time over sunny Burbank, a place where it almost never snowed. He said the moment was about beauty born from sadness. For the shoot, the crew used tons of crushed ice and industrial fans to create the illusion of snow. Winona Ryder said filming that scene was like being inside a dream. The ice sculpture itself, shaped like an angel, symbolized both Edward's love and his isolation. His art brings beauty to others, but pain to himself. The moment became one of cinema's most poetic depictions of heartbreak. Fact 12. To create the film's eerie, storybook suburbia, production designer Bo Welch literally repainted an entire real-life neighborhood in Lutz, Florida. Every single house, over 50 of them, was coated in soft pastels like mint green, peach, and lemon yellow. Residents had to agree to the repainting and live inside the surreal color scheme for months. The streets looked like a dream from the outside, but felt unsettling in person, which was exactly what Tim Burton wanted. He wanted the audience to feel like they were trapped inside a 1950s postcard gone wrong. After filming wrapped, homeowners could choose to keep the paint or return to their original colors. Most didn't. They said living in Burton's pastel fantasy was too strange to stay. Fact 14. Believe it or not, Edward Scissorhands almost ended on a much darker note. Early drafts suggested that Edward might die either at the hands of the angry mob or by his own choice, unable to exist in a world that feared him. Tim Burton fought against this, insisting that Edward needed to live, even if isolated. The bittersweet ending we got, where Kim tells her granddaughter that Edward still carves ice sculptures in the mountains, was Burton's idea of poetic hope. It's tragic, yes, but also eternal. Edward's love for Kim literally changes the world, creating snow where none existed before. Burton later said it wasn't about death. It was about love surviving through time. Fact 15. The breathtaking snow dance scene looks magical even today, but not a single frame was CGI. The ice sculpture, fans, and snow were all done practically. Production crews carved massive blocks of real ice, then used industrial snow machines to scatter flakes through the air. Johnny Depp performed the scene in a sweltering studio, sweating under his leather suit while pretending to be freezing. Winona Ryder, meanwhile, had to dance barefoot in the fake snow, twirling under freezing air jets. The beauty of the moment is that none of it is artificial real ice, real exhaustion, real emotion. Burton wanted the scene to feel like pain disguised as beauty. When you watch that snowfall, you're seeing movie magic and human vulnerability working perfectly together. Fact 16. Danny Elfman's haunting score isn't just background music, it's the voice Edward never had. Elfman said composing for Edward Scissorhands was his most personal experience as a musician. He connected deeply with Edward's loneliness and innocence, saying, "I felt like I was writing for a child who wanted to touch the world but couldn't." The ethereal choir and waltz-like melodies became a signature of Elfman's style, blending melancholy with wonder. Burton trusted Elfman completely, even editing key scenes to match the rhythm of his music. The main theme, Ice Dance, has since become one of the most recognizable pieces in film history. It's no exaggeration to say that without Elfman's score, Edward Scissorhands would lose half its soul. Fact 17. Edward's gloomy Gothic mansion wasn't a CGI illusion. It was an enormous hand-built set constructed on a soundstage in Los Angeles. Production designer Bo Welch designed it to feel both grand and decaying, filled with machinery, vines, and shadow. The towering staircase and eerie laboratory were built full-scale, giving Depp real space to move through, which helped his performance feel grounded and physical. To create Edward's home world, the lighting team avoided warm tones completely. Everything was filtered through blue and gray gels. In contrast, the suburban neighborhood below was shot in warm, sunny pastels. The visual contrast told the story before a single word was spoken. Fact 18. Edward Scissorhands marked Vincent Price's last on-screen appearance before his death. Burton had idolized Price since childhood. His eerie yet elegant performances defined the director's love for Gothic cinema. Casting Price as the inventor wasn't just homage, it was destiny. Sadly, Price's health was failing during production. His final scene, where he dies before finishing Edward's hands, became heartbreakingly real. Burton said that directing that moment felt like watching a piece of film history fade before my eyes. Price passed away shortly after filming Wrap, making Edward Scissorhands both his swan song and his tribute. That tender smile he gave Edward before collapsing wasn't acting. It was a silent goodbye from horror's most graceful gentleman. Fact 19. At its core, Edward Scissorhands is Tim Burton's autobiography told through fantasy. Edward represents the part of himself that never fit in the quiet dreamer surrounded by people who don't understand his art, his strangeness, or his heart. Burton once said, "Edward was my most personal film. It's how I felt growing up." The film's themes of alienation, conformity, and fragile beauty were drawn from his own youth in suburban Burbank. Even Edward's black and white world clashing with pastel suburbia mirrors how Burton viewed his creative life versus normal society. It's why the story resonates decades later. We've all felt like Edward at some point. Behind the Gothic aesthetic lies something timeless, a reminder that it's okay to be different. Fact 20. Winona Ryder was hesitant to work with Tim Burton again after Beetlejuice. She loved him as a director, but didn't want to be typecast as the Burton girl. When she read the script for Edward Scissorhands, she hesitated until she reached the ending. The snow scene and Kim's final monologue convinced her to sign on immediately. Burton said Winona brought the light that Edward's world needed. Her character, Kim Boggs, became the emotional bridge between pastel perfection and Gothic sadness. Ryder's chemistry with Depp also added authenticity, since the two were romantically involved off-screen. Their relationship wasn't just tabloid fodder, it deepened the tenderness of every glance and heartbreak on camera. Without her, the movie wouldn't have had its soul. And there you have it, 20 surprising facts about Edward Scissorhands. It's a timeless reminder that beauty can be born from pain and that even the strangest souls can touch the world. Which fact blew your mind the most? Drop it in the comments. Hit like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you don't miss more creepy deep dives.